In recent code, I noticed that JSON access is much faster than the JSON module, but let's see how much faster. So we create a benchmark script, load the JSON module, and then the first thing is that we create a subroutine called create.json that would receive just a number and create a JSON string. It will create an array first with key value pairs, so the keys are the numbers and the values are the same numbers. And then we turn this array into a JSON string. So we use this mapping in order to create the array, and then we use the encode JSON function of the JSON module, pass the reference to it, and that returns the JSON string. Now let's see if whether they will really get back the string that we expected. So we just call the create JSON with the number 10 to make it small and to fit in the screen, and we print out the received JSON string. In the console, you can see that indeed what we get is little hashes in an array with key value pairs. Now, in order to compare the JSON module with the JSON access module, we have to load both. So we're going to use the JSON access module as well. And we also need the benchmark module. The benchmark module has various functions. We are going to use the compare these function that will get, first of all, it will get a number. That's the number of iterations it will run the functions, and it will get a hash where the keys are, well, just names, and the values are subroutines or anonymous subroutines that need to be run. So in this case, we're going to run 100 times the two functions that we are going to see now. The first one is the JSON. It was just called JSON because that's that's calling the JSON decode JSON. So it's the Perl version, should be. And the other one is the JSON access module, which is calling the same function from the JSON access module, passing to both of them in the JSON string. And then this run will run both of these functions 100 times and then show the compared results. In the console, we are going to run this with the time command, so we'll also see how long did it take. When we run this, the first thing you can see that there's a warning, the too few iterations. That's because we only ran 100 times and the JSON itself was really small. So let's make both the JSON bigger and enlarge the number of iterations. So if we run this again, this time it takes more than a second to run this, and you can see that it's plus minus 5%. It's not really a lot of difference, but let's enlarge further the number of iterations, enlarge it by 10. So it's now going to run about 11 seconds or 12 seconds, and then we'll probably see a better, more precise result. And then you can see here that these are the same numbers. So basically, it means that these two modules run the same. Except that if you look at the documentation of JSON that we are doing right now, you will see that if it finds JSON access, then it will actually use that instead of the pure Perl version. So the JSON module has actually a pure Perl backend, and that's the default, or that's going to be used if there is no access version. But if the access was available, then it was using the access. So basically we were comparing the same exact functions. Now, in order to actually measure the Perl version, we have to load it explicitly and then use it. In our benchmark, we have to use the JSON BP explicitly. Now we are going to reduce slightly the size of the JSON, the number of iterations we have to play with it, because the Perl version is going to take a lot longer, and well, it's 2 seconds, but we can already see that the Perl version is much slower. What happens if we really add another 0 there? So it's going to be now running, instead of 2.5 seconds, it's going to be 25 seconds, and hopefully it will show that the Perl version is still much slower. So what you can see here is actually that the access version runs about 3000% faster. Or if you look at the first or second column, the rate, then it shows how many iterations it can do in a second. So you can see that the pure Perl version only gets 400, while the access version can run 15,000 times. So it's clear that the access version is much, much faster than the pure Perl version. So if you can afford, then you should use always the access version. Now there is another module called cpanel JSON access, which is basically a fork of the access module, and we're going to compare it with the access module. The big difference between the access module and the cpanel version of it is that the cpanel version has a few bugs fixed, and it has a public version control. Now we're going to run the benchmark again, and the difference is 2%, which is probably just a measuring error on our behalf.